everybody, what's up? It's NihonTiger. Welcome back to Build It Yourself, and today we have this. You're probably wondering, okay, you've made a circle inside of another circle, so is this supposed to be some kind of tower? And the answer is yes, in a way, because we're not really focusing on building towers today as much as doing some of the detail work, because right around here, right here, take a look at this top layer on the bottom here where it meets the bottom layer on the inner circle. This is kind of a seam, and it's fairly obvious that this is where, this stops and this begins. So the idea is, how can we make it a little more seamless? Yes, that's where I was going with that. Okay. Wasn't that great, but there are a couple options when dealing with a tower, whether it's a circle or a square or whatever shape you have it in. There are some different options in how we can... Oh, sorry about that. My mouse just kind of went haywire. But there's some different options on how we can get rid of this seam or at least de-emphasize it. So let's go over a couple of them. Well, the first one is you could just do nothing. Sometimes you kind of want the rough look on your tower. It's alright, especially if you're building with a bigger project, but more often than not, you're going to want to do something with it, and do nothing is not really an option. So, what other options do we have? The first option is probably the one that most people are going to use, which is to take a bunch of stairs or slabs or other blocks and kind of have them facing inward, so it kind of makes, I guess you could say, it makes a seal around the top here. If you take a look real quick here, the stairs, which you can arrange in various patterns, generally go from the wider bottom area to the thinner top area, and it makes a little bit of a slope. So you can see it kind of slopes up and it goes that way. And for the most part, this is what a lot of people will use. It's fairly easy to do, fairly simple, but it doesn't always kind of give the right feel for a building. It makes it kind of look very slender and slim, and in some cases a little bit futuristic even. And for some builds, you don't really want that kind of definition between layers. You want it to stand out a little bit more. Well, don't worry, there's an option for that too. So the other option really is to take those stairs and put the detail facing outward, almost making these little parapets. And what that will do is kind of give a feel that this tower is growing out of the bigger tower rather than just being slimmed down to be part of it. You can also go ahead and add in some additional detail blocks here to kind of add a bit more pop to your tower. One of the ways you can do it is simply to take some stair fences and put them in between each of the stairs. And it kind of gives the feeling that there's even more parapets here, and there's more separation between each of these blocks. Now the stairs will attach themselves to the back wall here, so keep that in mind. But they won't attach themselves to the stairs. You can also go ahead and take out each of these blocks that are between the outward facing stairs, acting as parapets if you want to. And this will give you a bit more of a slimming feel, or feel that this part of the tower that has the parapets on it is kind of outgrowing the rest of this tower or the bottom layer. So it makes you feel like the bottom layer is actually right here, and this is a little bit higher. You can also go ahead and do it on the corners here, or you could even use half slabs if you wanted to. Doesn't really matter too much. However, it's worth noting that these two options are not the only options that we can use to create a little bit of a distraction around where the seam of the tower is. So let's try something a little bit more advanced. So here we've kind of taken both ideas, combined them together a little bit, and come up with something that's really unique and perhaps even fits the tower we're trying to build. What we've done is, instead of taking the blocks and having them face directly in or out on top of the layer over here for the inner tower, is we've built outward and built almost a little bit of a green space around here between the towers that's supported underneath by this base. What this does is that instead of having the tower on bottom extend upward and over the inner tower almost extends upward and over the bottom tower, but in both cases it hides the seam, which is right there, pretty well. Now obviously this won't be a build that works on all towers, and As you can see, it doesn't quite extend all the way down over these bottom tower layers. You do want to have a little bit of space here to kind of keep things not too complex. You don't want it to have a situation where you have like 1,000 of these little pillars dangling down. It's a little too much, and plus it takes away from the actual support pillars here if you have them on every single layer. It's too much detail. Just kind of distracting. But as you can see here, this outer lip actually kind of extends over the bottom tower itself, but it's something that looks like it could be supported by these beams. So it's just an alternative idea. Basically, you'll have to kind of come up with something that works well for the build you're trying to do, and that will depend on your skill, what you're aiming for, various different little factors that play into it. But there's one more type of building that we want to address. So what we've got here is a usual square building. You might find this in a village or a city or somewhere else. It's got two different types of blocks. Obviously, your base block down here, and the second floor is up here, or perhaps this is the first floor. It doesn't really matter. But in any case, what we've got here is a very visible seam line between these two different types of blocks, and perhaps we want to go ahead and separate them. Well, how can we do that pretty easily? Here's a couple of options, in fact 2 in particular that I wanted to highlight. First and foremost, here's your basic frame, and the idea here is that we're using these dark oak wood blocks to kind of frame the outside of the building, almost like an outside support structure, where these walls are actually being reinforced by the support pillars over here. And if you take a look, we're placing these right now over the top layer of where this stone block layer is. You can move this up or down. You can have it, up here, depending on, where you want it at, where your windows are at. So you could, in theory, have it a little further up here if you wanted to, depending on how you want your structure to look. If you want more of the base down here and less of the green stuff, you could do that. But that is one way to do it. It's fairly easy to do. All you have to do is find where your seam line is and basically build a grid around it out of wood. Usually wood, but other objects are okay. I prefer wood because I think it looks really nice as a support beam, and it's really one of the only blocks that works as a support beam in Minecraft. But yeah, as you can see here, you're building on the corners, but you're not replacing the actual corner itself. So there's a second way to do this, slightly a bit more complex, but it's just as easy to do. So can you spot the changes I made here? Well, it's pretty easy if you come over here and take a look at it from the side. All we've done is taken these inner green walls and move them out onto the actual support beam. What this does is makes a little bit of an overhang for the base layer over here, and creates actually a little bit more space on the inside too. Now, to cover up these blocks, you can either replace them because they're being blocked here by the support beams, or if you don't like that and want to keep this on top of here, just place some slabs on top of it. Remember that when you're using slabs, when you have these slabs that are on the bottom half of a block, like so, you can't put anything on top of it besides another slab of the same type, which means if you want to build, say, furniture, put down a bed, do all kinds of things with here, your best bet is to have this be on the top half of a block like this. So either option works. It just depends on what you're going for. And I personally kind of like having the second floor a little bit over on top of this first one. I think it makes it look a little bit nicer, just as far as detail and pop goes. It doesn't look as flat, but either option is pretty good if you're trying to build a village house or something nice in the city. Just be careful. Once you do this on one layer, you don't want to repeat this on other layers. So you can have 2 floors below and have a 3rd floor with an overhang like this, but you don't want to have a 1st floor and an overhang on the 2nd floor and an overhang on the 3rd floor. That just looks awkward, like some kind of reverse pyramid. And really, no houses look like that. I don't think they would really even support the weight and structure properly if you did it that way. But that's about it for my basic super quick tutorial on how to hide some pretty basic kind of seam lines. If there's any seam lines that you guys are more interested in figuring out, okay, how do I hide this, or how can I work around this project, just let me know in the comments and I'll try and put out a video to address some of those concerns. But keep in mind, if you're over here and you're living in a box house like this, there's not much you can do to hide the seam lines at all. Plus, you're also living in a box house. It's not the best house to live in.